The Godzilla franchise started as far back as 1954. That's 70 years ago. In these 70 years, we've had around 40 movies, and it's only natural that some of these got pushed under the rug. While not all the Godzilla movies were great, some of them deserved way more love and respect than they got. With the next Godzilla film around the corner, we thought it was time to explore the 13 most underrated Godzilla movies of all time. I've arranged the movies in chronological order for a better perspective. Let's begin, shall we? But before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. So thank you. Let's begin. Godzilla raids again, 1955. The story begins with Shoichi Tsukioka, a pilot working for Kaio Fishing Inc. His friend, Koji Kobayashi, suffers a faulty engine and has to belly land on Iwato Island. Tsukioka flies out to save Kobayashi's bacon, but instead of a simple rescue, they stumble upon monsters. They find Godzilla fighting Anguirus, who's basically a supermassive ankylosaurus. They barely make it out as these titans take the tussle to the sea. Back in Osaka, Tsukioka and Kobayashi contact Dr. Yamane and the bigwigs to brainstorm on this Godzilla problem. Yamane reveals that the original Godzilla got hit by the oxygen destroyer, but the genius behind it is 6 feet under, which leaves them without a plan. He suggests turning off the city lights and using flares to shoo Godzilla away, since it's got a thing against bright lights. Meanwhile, Tsukioka and his girl Hidemi worry about what's gonna happen to Osaka. The JASDF is up in the air hunting for Godzilla, but it's like looking for a needle in a haystack because this bad boy could be in any cave under the sea. Soon enough, Godzilla was spotted heading towards the Key Channel, putting Tsukioka's boss and Hidemi's dad, Yamaji, on edge, since their fishing grounds were on the line. Just when they think they've got Godzilla's attention, with the flares in Osaka Bay, a bunch of convicts break loose, causing chaos and accidentally lighting up an oil refinery. That mess draws Godzilla right back to Osaka. And as if one monster isn't enough, Anguirus shows up, and they go at it again, tearing up the city and Yamaji's cannery in the process. The movie did perform well financially, but that can be attributed to the success of the prequel. Fans and critics said that the film was super rushed for a sequel. However, this is the first Godzilla film where Big G was seen fighting other monsters, and it would go on to become a usual trope for the future movies of the franchise. Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, 1966. The film begins with Ryota, who was looking for his brother Yatta. It turns out that Yatta had gone missing at sea not long ago. Ryota hijacks a yacht with his friends and a guy who has just robbed a bank, and heads out into the water. But they meet a slight hiccup in the form of Ebirah, a massive lobster-like monster who feels territorial because the men are on his turf. Eventually, they end up on Lechi Island, the lair of an organization called Red Bamboo. Now, Red Bamboo was all things evil, and their day job was trading in WMDs. Interestingly, they kept Ebirah on a leash with some weird yellow liquid. Additionally, they had people from Infant Island slaving away, who were in fact the ones making this yellow stuff. They hope that their guardian, Mothra, will someday wake up and save them. Ryota and his team stumble upon Godzilla, but Big G was out cold in a cave. In order to wake him up, they stir up a storm, literally, and hope he'll deal with their Red Bamboo problem. Godzilla wakes up cranky, fights with Ebirah, and deals with a giant condor and some fighter jets. He doesn't stop there, and fries them all with his atomic breath. Meanwhile, our human heroes find Yatta, free the slaves, and kickstart Godzilla's rampage on Red Bamboo's HQ, which actually triggers a bomb that was set to redecorate the island, if you know what I mean. Now, Ebirah, Horror of the Deep was one movie that would have divided the internet back in the 60s, if those folks had the internet, that is. The movie focused largely on human action and the human element instead of monster battles. While some praised this approach, others felt that they did not get what they paid for. Nevertheless, the movie is still a must-watch for any fan of Godzilla. Godzilla vs. Hedora, 1971. In this 1971 gem, this alien sludge monster named Hedora hitches a ride to Earth on a comet. This thing is bad news, as it thrives on our pollution. Eventually, it grows stronger and starts spewing poison and acid everywhere. It takes down an oil tanker and roughs up Dr. Todoyano and his son Ken, before leaving the doctor with some serious scars. Ken soon gets a vision that Godzilla is gonna step up and fight off this pollution monster, because, you know, Godzilla's got our back. It's not long before Hedora tells himself he's not happy just being a sea monster. He wants to come to the land and munch on more pollution. So, like any self-respecting sea monster trying to come to land, it grows legs to stroll over to a power station for a snack. Godzilla also arrives, ready to fight, and they do just that. But Hedora's a tough cookie and slips away into the sea, only to come back stronger. He even displays some shape-shifting abilities and goes from a flying saucer appearance to its final boss mode. With Hedora on the rampage, Japan finds itself in a real mess, and people are throwing what they think might be their last party on Mount Fuji. Of course, they were expecting the worst. Godzilla vs. Hedora isn't your typical monster movie, but with a tinge of eco-nightmare, which made Hedora not just another beast for Godzilla to beat, but a symbol of the horrors of pollution. What sets this movie apart from its brethren is its trippy side. Think psychedelic visuals, a groovy soundtrack, bits of animation, and wait for it, a scene where Godzilla takes flight. Yeah, you heard that right. It's out there kinda bizarre and absolutely unforgettable, which probably explains why it's got a cult following, and it's seen by some as one of the most underrated entries in the Godzilla saga. Godzilla vs. Gyan, 1972. Godzilla vs. Gyan is a movie where it feels like Earth's next real estate crisis comes from outer space. Alien roaches from the doomed M-Space Hunter Nebula eye Earth because they trash their own home. These bugs morph into dead humans and start running a so-called peace park, World's Children Land, with a Godzilla tower at its centerpiece. Their plan is to unleash space monsters Gyan and King Gadora to kick humanity to the curb. We meet Gengo Kotaka, a manga artist who accidentally crashes the alien party plan after scoring a job at the park. Gengo and his team get a hold of a monster mixtape and play it, not knowing it's basically a monster beacon and can be used to control Gyan and King Gadora. Godzilla and Anguirus tune into the distress signal, and Godzilla sends Anguirus to scope out Tokyo. The JSDF misreads Anguirus' intentions and shoos him away. Anguirus hightails it back to Monster Island to report, and Godzilla's like, let's roll. Well, yes, the movie had comic book style conversations between these two protector monsters. They head to Japan to fight Gyan and King Gadora. Meanwhile, Gengo's team outsmarts the aliens, turning their tech addiction against them, which leads them to their own downfall. Critics might bash Godzilla vs. Gyan for its draggy pace, recycled scenes, and wobbly tone, but there's a chunk of fans who love the monster team-up action, classic tunes, and the debut of Gyan alongside the comeback of King Gadora and Anguirus. This movie was part of the Showa era's home stretch, where the Godzilla series was pinching pennies and aiming at a younger crowd, which also saw a dose of goofiness in a monster flick. Not everyone's cup of tea. Known for its comic book style conversations between Godzilla and Anguirus, this movie splits the room. You're either all in for its quirky charm, or you're not. Terror of Mechagodzilla, 1975. Terror of Mechagodzilla, the 15th and final movie of the Godzilla Showa series, gave us a double-threat monster movie that had Godzilla going toe-to-toe against Mechagodzilla and the new kid on the block, Titanosaurus. So after Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla left us hanging, Interpol dove deep, literally, to hunt for Mechagodzilla's scraps. But instead, they bump into Titanosaurus. And let's just say, he was not exactly thrilled to see them. The movie then introduces Akira Ichinose, a marine biologist, and Jiro Murakoshi, an Interpol agent, who are trying to piece together the Titanosaurus puzzle. They also look into the story of Shinzo Mifune, the scientist who recently went from a nobody to a nefarious villain by teaming up with space bad guys, aka the Black Hole Planet 3 aliens. These aliens have patched up Mechagodzilla, and with Mifune's help, have Titanosaurus on a tight leash, ready to unleash both of them on Tokyo. Naturally, Godzilla steps into the ring to fight these two, which paves the way for a three-way monster battle that's the stuff of kaiju legend. Despite its efforts, Terror of Mechagodzilla ended up being the curtain call for the Showa era, not by choice, but because the box office told them to take a seat. It wasn't the end of Godzilla, however, but it sure closed the chapter on an era. After this movie, there was a hiatus until 1984, when we got the reboot of the Godzilla movie. Directed by Ishiro Honda, the OG Godzilla Whisperer, this movie serves as his directorial send-off. The Return of Godzilla, 1984. The Return of Godzilla was the franchise's first movie after the Showa era, and with this one, the franchise went back to its roots by ditching the monster teams of later Showa films. They went for a grittier, darker movie that resembled the OG 1954 Godzilla. 9 years after the Showa era ended, Godzilla was back with a vengeance. Big G was quite literally making waves and causing chaos. The story starts with a fishing boat getting the shock of their lives at sea. Everyone perishes, and only one guy is left to tell the tale of Godzilla, the uninvited guest. Japan's higher-ups try to keep Godzilla a secret because they didn't want to start a mass panic, but the Big G doesn't play play by human rules. He takes out a Soviet sub, and suddenly the Cold War has a new player. Godzilla didn't know it, but he turned international relations into a hot mess. The US, Japan, and the USSR are at the table, trying to figure out how to deal with this atomic age monstrosity, as Godzilla sets his sights on Tokyo. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, a Soviet nuke is accidentally sent flying Tokyo's way, thanks to Godzilla's knack for stirring up trouble. And suddenly it seems that Godzilla might not be the biggest problem on the block. Jump-starting the Heisei series, The Return of Godzilla shifts gears from heroics to horror, and shows Godzilla as the force of nature he was always meant to be. Unstoppable, uninterested in playing the hero, and all about that destruction life. With Cold War fears as its backdrop, the film cranks the doomsday feels up to 11, which makes for a Godzilla movie that's as intense as it is heavy. Released internationally with an American edit as Godzilla 1985, the purist will tell you to stick with The Return of Godzilla for the full, uncut experience of Godzilla's horrifying comeback. Godzilla vs. Bolante, 1989. Godzilla vs. Bolante was the second movie of the Heisei era, and it picked up straight from the aftermath of Godzilla's Tokyo rampage in the previous movie. With Godzilla's cells now the hottest commodity on the black market, it's a free-for-all with governments and the shady organization called Biomajor. All of these guys want a piece of the action, or Godzilla's cells for that matter. We've got Dr. Genichiro Shiragami mixing Godzilla's cells with a rose to keep his daughter's memory alive, but he ends up creating Bolante, a mega kaiju that's part rose, part Godzilla, part human, and all trouble. In what can be called the classic case of didn't think this through, a botched extortion job by Biomajor brings Godzilla back from his volcanic hibernation. As Godzilla makes a beeline for Bolante at Lake Ashi, the JSDF brings their latest toys to tackle the situation at hand. Once again, it is quite a monster battle, but humanity is caught in the mix. Godzilla vs. Bolante was a typical kaiju clash, but more importantly, it's a fan-favorite hidden gem that mixes horror, sci-fi, and action with a surprising dash of heart, something that's not often seen in kaiju movies. The story plays with the themes of grief and loss, and ties the human element closely to the monster action. Bolante is one of the most unique Godzilla adversaries because it's a botanical nightmare with a touch of human tragedy. It was brought to life with some seriously impressive special effects. Needless to say, it offers more emotional depth and creative monster mayhem than your average monster movie. Definitely one for both the diehards and those new to the Godzilla universe looking for something a bit different. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, 1991. I have to admit, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah cranked the whole Godzilla saga into overdrive with Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah and the whole ride through time thing. Godzilla was basically chilling in the Sea of Japan. You could say he was nursing a hangover from some anti-nuclear energy bacteria after duking it out with Bolante in the previous movie. He's been out of the game for 2 years, but then these time-traveling tourists, aka the Futurians, from 2204 drop by. This became Big G's cue to go full demolition mode on Japan. The plan for the Futurians was to go back to 1944 and get a dinosaur from Lagos Island before it can get mutated into Godzilla by a 1954 H-bomb test. But these so-called Futurians were not really playing Jurassic Park. They leave behind these 3 creatures called Dorats, which catch the H-bomb's makeover and morph into King Ghidorah, the 3-headed nightmare that starts tearing through Japan like it's Black Friday. Japan's response was to make Godzilla 2.0 with a nuclear sub. However, Godzilla wasn't actually wiped from the timeline. He devours the sub, bulks up, and became ready to fight King Ghidorah. This movie is a total trip. Good or bad, I'll let you decide. There's time travel, monsters, and a dash of be careful what you wish for, all packed in one fine blend. With Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, the franchise dialed up the weird and wonderful and served up a story that's as bonkers as it is entertaining. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, 1993. After the chaos of Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, the world had had enough and formed the UNGCC, basically a Godzilla SWAT team, with their own tech divisions called G-Force. They built some serious hardware, including a flying fortress called Garuda, and a Godzilla clone. Yep, the Mechagodzilla. This one was created thanks to the leftover bits of Mecha King Ghidorah. 2 years later, a Japanese team stumbles upon what they think is a giant pterodon egg on Adona Island, but it was actually Godzilla's baby. baby, and this egg was causing all sorts of trouble. For instance, it drew Rodan. Godzilla and Rodan get into a fight, with Godzilla leaving Rodan in the dust and the humans escaping with the egg. Back in Kyoto, the egg hatches into baby Godzilla, and suddenly everyone is playing Monster Daycare. Godzilla feels the parental pull and heads toward Kyoto, and that's when Mechagodzilla enters the picture. They engage each other, but Godzilla shuts down Mechagodzilla with an energy pulse. Despite the fuss, the baby stays hidden, and this, in turn, leads Godzilla to trash Kyoto out of frustration before going back to the sea. The scientists later discover that the baby Godzilla has a backup brain in its hips, which they figure Godzilla must have too. So they plan to use baby as bait in round 2 with Mechagodzilla, now upgraded with the G-Crusher, aimed at Godzilla's secondary brain. Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, 1994. Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla was pretty much what I would call a cosmic roller coaster. It starts with Godzilla's cells reaching space, where they get sucked in by a black hole. Soon, Space Godzilla was born due to these mutated Godzilla cells. Space Godzilla then arrives on Earth and casually wrecks a NASA station on his way down. Back on Earth, the UN's Godzilla squad reaches Birth Island with plans to put a mind leash on Godzilla. The JSDF then brings its latest toy, Mogira, into the mix to stop Space Godzilla. But, as should be expected with a Godzilla movie, things go south real fast. Space Godzilla shows up at Birth Island and strikes little Godzilla with his Corona beam, and puts him in a crystal prison sort of thing. Of course, Big G steps in, but Space Godzilla is more than a match for Big G, who ends up on the losing side, at least for now. Meanwhile, the Yakuza kidnap Miki, a psychic who can communicate with and even control Godzilla for her brain power. The Yakuza hope to DIY their way to create a Godzilla remote control. Fortunately for Miki, she gets rescued just in time for Space Godzilla to turn Fukuoka into his personal crystal palace. Mogira takes another swing at him, but ends up playing second fiddle again. Eventually, Godzilla comes back for a rematch, but it seems that Space Godzilla is still holding the cards. Interestingly, the JSDF figures out that Space Godzilla was getting his powers from Fukuoka Tower. Godzilla and Mogira, now a team, go berserk on Space Godzilla. Godzilla lands the finishing blow with a turbocharged heat ray, thereby ending Space Godzilla once and for all. Critics are all over the map on this one. It's a mix of not bad, could be better, and what even, with props for the monster mashup and Space Godzilla's villainous skills, but thumbs down on the convoluted plot and hit-or-miss effects. Still, for those in it for the city stomping and monster rumbles, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla delivers the goods with some extra space spice. Godzilla 2000, Millennium, 1999. After Hollywood's 1998 Godzilla attempt had fans asking, what was that? Toho stepped back into the ring with Godzilla 2000, Millennium. Toho hit the reset button, and no one really complained. This movie ditched the sequels and brought Godzilla back as the OG monster that just loves to wreak havoc on Japan. As the year 2000 looms and the world prepares for a new millennium, Godzilla is on his usual rampage. But this time, there's a bit of a change. A mysterious rock at the bottom of the ocean opens to reveal a UFO. The UFO goes toe-to-toe with Godzilla and manages to put him down, but not out. Then it parks itself on Tokyo's city tower and starts downloading all the internet just for kicks. But Big G soon comes back and gears up for round 2, leaving humanity scratching their heads over what these space visitors want with our favorite radioactive giant lizard. Godzilla 2000 started the Millennium series, where Toho gave fans a palate cleanser. After the '98 Hollywood hiccup, it was a back-to-basics Godzilla movie with a fresh alien enemy, Orga, who had a look cool enough to match the best of Godzilla's foes. It was not the top of the Godzilla food chain in terms of movies, but it was a solid return to form because it had enough monster clashes and city mashing to remind everyone why Godzilla's the king. No frills, just Godzilla doing what he does best, teaching unwelcome aliens that Earth isn't the best place for a vacation. Godzilla vs. Megagearus, 2000. Godzilla vs. Megagearus throws us into a different lane of the Millennium series, flipping the script with a new Godzilla, fresh off the classic 1954 Rampage and making sporadic energy snack runs throughout Japan's history. The G-Graspers, Japan's elite Godzilla busters, have had enough and cook up a plan. Zap Godzilla into another dimension with their latest toy, the Dimension Tide, a black hole gun. But as with all plans involving giant monsters, things get complicated. The gun's test shot accidentally opens a can of prehistoric worms, or more accurately, dragonflies called Meganula, unleashing their queen, Megagearus, a giant bug juiced up on Godzilla's own energy. What follows is a monster mash, with Godzilla taking on Megagearus in a showdown that has the Big G seemingly defeated by the Dimension Tide, only for a twist. Godzilla's not gone, just taking a dirt nap underground. Released hot on the heels of Godzilla 2000 Millennium, Godzilla vs. Megagearus might not hit the high notes of the series for everyone, with its early 2000s CGI giving some of the effects a less than timeless look. Despite the tech troubles, Megagearus brings something new to the monster table, with her aerial acrobatics and bug army, keeping the action buzzing from start to finish. It's a mix of high stakes, sci-fi gadgets, and of course, monster fights that might not be the crown jewel of Godzilla films, but is far from the bug spray-worthy flick some might claim. Godzilla vs. Megagearus offers up a unique face-off, and proves that even Godzilla's off days are pretty entertaining. Godzilla Tokyo SOS 2003. Godzilla Tokyo SOS was the sequel to Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, and was set just 1 year after Kiryu and Godzilla's fight. This time around, the Shobijin, those tiny twin priestesses of Mothra, pop up with a request to give the first Godzilla's bones back to the sea. They're not thrilled about humanity using them to power Kiryu, and claim that it was messing with the natural order. The government was on the fence, however, because ditching Kiryu sounded like a bad idea, with Godzilla still stomping around. Right on cue, Godzilla returns to Tokyo, proving their point. Mothra swoops in, ready to fight with Godzilla, or rather argue with him, to make her case for nature's balance. With Godzilla tearing up Tokyo again, the government's hand is forced, and Kiryu is thrown back into the fray. Godzilla Tokyo SOS serves as the Millennium series' penultimate chapter, sandwiched between two American takes on the Godzilla mythos. Despite being a slight step down from its predecessor, it's a must-watch for the full Mechagodzilla experience. This installment is a fun ride, as it mixes kaiju action with a bit of modern CGI effects. Mothra adds a classic touch, and the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla rematch delivers all the monster mayhem you could ask for. It's a fast-paced movie that sweeps most of its flaws under the rug, with sheer entertainment value, making it a treat for fans of the more contemporary Godzilla scenes. I'm sure that if you've reached this point in the video, you're a fan of the franchise, so I'd like to understand from you what you thought about the list. How many of these have you watched? Do you have any suggestions you'd like to make? You know where to comment. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.